And now a continuation of One Was Stubborn, one of L. Ron Hubbard's Stories of the Golden Age, as read by the bathroom reader for a one-take toilet top audiobook production. I am filling in for the Plurality Report, who is currently busy feeding the Israelis intel info on the whereabouts of Iran's top military brass. During the remainder of that day, I did nothing more than sit and look at the patterns in the fluffoplex floor. I was half angry, half scared, and I was trying my best to understand just what George Smiley, the Messiah, was doing. I have been told that I have a suspicious nature. However, that may be, I suspected, George Smiley. Every person I had seen for weeks, now that I came to think about it, had had the same strange fixity of expression which my wife had borne, just as though everyone had become a saint. It was much against my principles to surrender to the extent of examining the problem, but at last, when night, as I thought, had come, I went into the next room and fumbled around until I found what papers my wife had accumulated during the past month or two. I sat and read, then, for nearly 2 hours. But at the end of that time, I was not even close to a solution. All I discovered was that George Smiley had come from Arcton with a message. Of course, I knew that everyone in the universe was bored and would welcome any kind of diversion, and that such a time, according to my Tribbin's Rise and Fall of the American Empire, provided unscrupulous men with a host of willing dupes for religious experimentation. That many of these had been maniacs was a fact which Tribbin, the great unbeliever, italicized. But so far in history, no one man had managed to swing a nation, much less the universe, around to his method of thinking. But it had been so long since any man had had to develop an original idea that almost any idea would have been acceptable. I suppose that it was the perfection of communication which made it possible for George Smiley to reach everyone everywhere, and the freedom which the machine magistration gave all religious exponents accounted for George Smiley's not being stopped. And, worse luck, it seemed that I was the only man left that didn't want to slip off into the limbo. It had already been proved that mass concentration could do away with material objects, but that fact was so old that, until now, it had lain dormant, except in the pranks of schoolboys who, learning about it for the first time, vanished desks out from in front of their professors. George Smiley, according to these reports, was a virile fellow who had lived alone for years and years as a prospector on Arcton. But the fact that his parents were not known made me believe that perhaps both his father and his mother had finished this life as members of the famous Arcton prison to which so many universal criminals were shipped. Did this George Smiley have a grudge against the whole universe? That sardonic smile of his, and those terrifying eyes. Well, it wasn't going to do me any good to sit and moon over the papers. Besides, I felt I had better put them back before my wife found that I was reading them. Such surrender was unthinkable. Accordingly, I walked into the living room and fell. There must be ground under me. I lit, and then I sat there, staring all about me in helpless bewilderment. There wasn't any living room anymore. Maybe my own room? No, there was no sign of that either. The papers I had been holding in my hand. For a second, one sheet rustled, and then it too faded away. There was something solid under me, but that was all the solidity anywhere. The city, perhaps the world, perhaps everything, was a flood of gray and curling mist. I felt of myself and was relieved to know that I was still myself anyway. For an instant I had wondered and, wondering, had felt myself thin and pale. But I was again solid, and that upon which I was seated was still ground, and so I took slight heart. What, I wondered, had happened to my wife? And what had happened to the house and the city? Certainly there must be something left of the city, and I began to feel that if I couldn't find something of it, I should certainly go mad. No more Condensa-Chow food. No more Old Space Ranger whiskey. Oh my goodness. Yes, I had to find the city. I stood up and groped before me, my hands nearly invisible in the murk. Step by step I found ground, and once I thought I saw the corner of a building. When I approached it closely, it too, however, was gone. For what seemed an hour, I floundered about without being able to locate a street. I was getting angry, probably because I was getting scared. I consulted my watch and found out that it was 10:30. For what seemed like a long while, I kept on working along, expecting any moment to find a wall or a conveyor belt or a parked auto-airbeal, but each next moment being disappointed. Finally, I again looked at my watch. It was still 10:30. I thought that I must have missed the hands the first time in the absence of light, but there was no missing them now, for the dial glowed softly and the mist itself seemed to have some quality of illumination. And then, having groped for what seemed yet a third half-hour, I looked once more at my watch. It was still 10:30. Had something happened to time itself? Was I adrift in something which wasn't space? There were no quiz clickers gaping for their pennies and their questions on each lamp post anymore, and so I had to try and answer it myself. Yes, there was space. I could feel myself, and I knew I moved, and so there must be space. If it took me time to move, perhaps, I thought, I had better locate someone else before I went completely mad. For all this murk was seeping into my heart. Like drifting smoke, it curled and wound and spired, leaving black alleys stretching endlessly out and then rolling in upon the openings and swallowing them, leaving towers which stretched an infinity up and down, then devouring the towers. The very solidity on which I trod was hidden. There was no direction to anything, and I felt that I might well be upside down or horizontal for all I knew, and I might not be walking on anything at all. And at that thought, I began to fall, and falling, I feared earth, and fearing earth, I landed. Oh, I was ill. The thought that I must keep earth in mind, or fall again, was enough to make me do just that. And when again I was upon solidity, I understood that I might drop an infinity, step by step, and never arrive at anything. With great suddenness, it came to me that so long as I believed in myself, I was. So long as I believed there was space, I was adrift in a murky ocean of mist, drowned in an immensity of nothingness, marooned in non-existence. I must find somebody. I could not tolerate being alone. And so I stumbled forward, groping hopefully. I was not used to walking any more than anyone else had been used to it, and I began to tire. I had fallen far, I knew, and I supposed I would have to rise again to the same altitude of the city's site before I could discover anything. But I was wrong. I had begun to wish violently for a bucket to bear me upward, and then, banging my shins, I ran into the bucket. I had been wandering so long and so far without any contacts that I gripped that bucket as one grips a lost friend found again. Joyously I put my feet upon it. Gratefully I sank into its fluffoplex arms, and upward I went. I was almost certain now that I had sunk no lower than the 5th level subsurface, for there the buckets began, and so I waited patiently for the conveyance to gently alight me upon a higher level. But I just kept on going up. Ordinarily, it used to take a bucket not more than a minute to lift anyone 20 levels. But I realized that I had been sitting there at least 5 minutes, ascending swiftly through impenetrable mist. In sudden panic, I wondered where I was going. No bucket I had ever seen could have gone as high as this. Why, I must be on a level with the court domes, or, God help me, I must be about to crash through the weather roof. Suddenly, I beheld a glass pane above. The bucket hit it squarely and rebounded. Madly, I gripped at the chair arms. What if this bucket should vanish? What if the bucket, too, should cease to be? And it did. I fell through these giddy mists. Only an air cab could have saved me. And then I wasn't falling. I was sitting in an air cab. For several seconds, I just sat there, clinging thankfully to the seat, not thinking at all about where I might be going. The driver must have seen me falling and zipped under me and was waiting now for me to recover my breath before he asked my destination. I leaned past the meter. "Thank you," I said. "If you'll take me to the food central, I'll be very grateful." A face and nothing more glowed briefly above the bar control, and a voice snarled, "You can't do this to me! Who the hell do you think you are?" And the face was gone, and the air cab went purring along, utterly driverless. I was shaken, for it took me some time to understand just what was happening to me. I felt that if I went on like this much longer without the solace of a drink, I should perish. Oh, for a little snort of that sweet whiskey, old Space Ranger. I drank it off, and instantly felt better. And then I felt worse. I hadn't been carrying a glass of old Space Ranger whiskey around with me all this time, and there wasn't anyone about who could have placed it in my hand. And yet I just had a drink, and instead of being in that air cab, I was sitting on nothing. What had happened to the air cab? Certainly I still must be in it. And there I was, purring along in the air cab again. "Driver," I said, "I don't understand." "Don't try it on me," snarled a face beside the meter. It vanished, all but the eyes, and these were so malevolent that I looked away. The air cab vanished too. I sat very still on whatever this solidity was, and tried to get myself straightened out. I had spoken to that driver twice, and each time he had almost appeared, and I felt that the next time I tried to bring him out, he would certainly deal roughly with me after the way of Hackees. Each time I had imagined things, it seems that those things had come to pass. Was I, then, a figment of my own imagination? Shiver the thought. Could I bring anything I wanted into being with my own thought? In his Rise and Fall of the American Empire, Trebon hinted that the future possibility that the world and even the universe might be destroyed by combined thought, the world and the universe evidently being nothing but an idea. Had humanity committed mass suicide or mass combination to the exclusion of matter? And was I, then, the only one left whose belief in his own individuality was so great that the individuality still existed? And being the only individual mind still possessed by a man, could I create at will? Or was I doomed forever and ever to drift aimlessly through this clammy mist, timeless and alone? I could not bear the thought. Trebon had stated that man's one redeeming feature was his own ability to create, and that he, therefore, assigned creativeness to God. And Trebon had said that when man no longer created, then man would no longer be. I had been the last manual farmer. Was I then the last man with ability to create? Certainly, if anything could be saved, or if anything could exist, then it must be created by myself. That was it. I must create. I glowed with the idea. I walked around on my created solidity and laughed aloud. All was before I had had to callous my hands and besweat my brow, but now I only had to think, and what things I wouldn't create. I came as close to dancing as I ever did in all my life. The mist. I would create sunlight. With all my wit, I concentrated, and then a shaft of light came from somewhere and played its beam upon me and warmed my rheumatic bones. Sunlight. But my own imagination I could bring to being light and warmth and cheer. I sang out, so great was my joy. Now, let me create a meadow which I would surround with trees and cross with a brook. I closed my eyes and concentrated, and when I opened them again, there was the meadow. I started to caper out into the tall grass, and then, mid-pace, stopped dead still. What had happened to the sunlight? The mist so befogged this meadow that it could scarcely be seen. Sunlight! Sunlight! And there it came again, that pleasant golden beam. But as soon as the sunlight came, the meadow vanished. How uncertain all this was. Was it possible that I could create but not enduringly? That I could create and maintain only one object at a time? Did these things depend wholly upon my ability to concentrate upon them? And even while I pondered the question, the sunlight faded before the mist, and I was again surrounded by the clammy grayness. But for all my disappointment, I had established one thing, that I could bring things into being, even if I could not maintain them. Certainly there must be some solution to this sort of thing. If I gave it enough thought, perhaps I could manage a way to trap sunlight and meadows into reality. I sat down upon my solidity and pursed my lips and stroked my chin. Try as I might, I could not remember if Trebon had had anything to say upon the subject of concentration. I thumbed hopefully through the index, but the only reference close to it was concentration camps, New York, San Francisco, Washington. I stared into the mist a while, and when I looked back at the book, it was gone. Oh well, I thought. I would rather have some old Space Ranger whiskey anyway. I drank it off, and it made me hungry. So I ate the steak. Feeling better, I again got restless. I could not sit around on an imagined solidity for all eternity. I could call down the sunlight at will, but I couldn't keep it there, and so I gave over. And then it occurred to me that the reason I thought I was standing upon something was because I had always stood upon something, and was so used to the idea that I could not shake it consciously. And the instant it became an idea only, I fell, and I became scared, and I landed. If I could only talk this over with someone. I sighed. But I was careful not to think I saw anyone, for people did not seem to like being hauled back from wherever they had gone. Certainly somewhere in all this there must be at least one other man willing to talk to me. To think that I was the only one was conceit of the most outrageous kind. Somewhere there was somebody. And if he and I could just get together, then he might know enough, and I might know enough as well, to put some semblance of a world together and hopefully keep it together. Again I wandered, and floundered, and fell when I thought about my solidity, and landed, and pawed through this endless mist. Once or twice I thought I saw people, but I could not be sure, for I was careful not to think that they were people. And when I had spent a timeless space in stumbling about, I forgot my caution, and, seeing a misty thing which looked like a man, I thought he was a man. Very briefly, he assumed a shape. It was nebulous and distorted, as though I looked at him through a drinking glass just emptied of milk.
"Stop it!"
he cried in a thin voice.
"By what right have you dragged me back? Vanish and be saved!"
And he vanished. From somewhere came caroling voices and an ineffably sweet harmony which I could not associate with any instruments I had ever heard. For an instant there had come over me an exquisite longing to forget myself and my misery and join that chorus. But then I remembered Flary and George Smiley, and doggedly I went on with my search. Half an eternity, it seemed, of toiling search. It took me a long while to discover that other one. A long while. I felt I had swum through a light year of mist, had fallen through the bottom of the universe, and had scrambled skyward to the sun itself. But I found him. He was a definite shape before I had any chance to think of him, and when I thought him not there, he was still there. I had found him. He was above me, perhaps 50 feet, and he seemed to be sitting on air and dangling his feet over the edge. Great gouts of mist rolled between us, blotting us from one another's sight. But each time the mist cleared, there we were again. I could not contain myself for joy, and he seemed to feel much the same way, for he waved his arms down at me and beckoned me up. I beckoned him to come down. We must have been farther apart than it seemed to our eyes, for he could not hear me, nor I him. He was evidently frightened to let go of his perch in air, and so I had to take the initiative. I looked along the way from me to him and thought hard about a stair. And step by step the stair appeared. I ran up it, shouting at him the while, but in my enthusiasm I forgot the stair, and it vanished. I landed as soon as I was frightened of the earth's impact, and again built the stair. This time I looked at the steps as I went up, and this time I arrived. He was a diminutive fellow, with a face which attested to a belligerent turn of mind, and his first greeting to me was,
Did you do all this?
"No, George Smiley did it."
Who?
"George Smiley."
Must have been an Earthman. I am from Carvon myself.
"Never heard of that," I said.
Well, it was a nice place. I was researching on the regime of Vaso, on Waman, and all of a sudden my book vanished, and here I was. And here I am.
"Here we both are," I said. "I've been looking all over for you. I need help. Did you see those stairs I just built?"
Yes, but they're gone now. It wasn't such a good job.
"Well, I've discovered that all we have to do is think of something real hard, and then it will come about. And if we can remember it..."
If we can remember it. I've been trying to concentrate on a ham sandwich for a day and a half, but I keep forgetting it before I can eat it. Oh, there it goes again.
"Now look, I'll think about it too."
No. Let's get something to sit on first. I don't know what's under me, and I don't...
"Shh, don't say that," said I, bravely saving him from falling. "All right, we'll think of a table. There's a table. Now you keep thinking about that table while I get a couple of chairs." He shut his eyes and kept a grip on the table. I shut mine and imagined us sitting on chairs. And there we were, sitting on chairs.
It's gone,
he said, and sure enough, the table was gone again. We had thought too hard about chairs. Finally, we managed to feel natural and remember chairs and think of the table too. And so, with some relief, we alternated thinking about things until we had something to eat and drink. But the trouble was that each time we would take a bite of something, we would forget about the table and the food would plummet out of sight. Somehow, we filled up, and then, looking thoughtful, he said,
You know, if we could just get practiced enough to think about all sorts of things, you and I, we could build the world back just about the way we want it. But the first thing we've got to do is put the sun in the sky. I'm sick of all this murk.
"All right," said I. "I'll think about the sun." And the sun shone brightly down. I must have been fairly well in practice, for I kept on talking and kept the sun up there at the same time. "Now you think of Earth," I said. He thought about Earth, and a sort of uneasy motion was set up under us, and flashy bits of scenery popped into view and vanished and popped back up again. Chinese tombs and far-off Dome City and ferry boats on a lake all appeared and disappeared.
It's not much use, he said. It just can't be done all at once. Let's imagine one town, and then, when we get used to that and believe in it, we'll imagine the fields around it.
"All right, but we really ought to imagine something to build the town on. Say a great globe in the sky, 25,000 miles in circumference."
Let's be different, he said suddenly. As long as you and I can do this all by ourselves, we'll just put this together on some new principles. There's no use copying what we've already had. Now, how about living inside the Earth? He stopped in awe. Why we, I cried. Why we're... Yes, we're...
"Oh no, gentlemen," said a silkily sardonic voice, and we both whipped around to find George Smiley standing there in his flash text cape. "If there is anything to be built, then I shall build it. You two are the most stubborn of all, but you've agreed with each other, and now you can agree with me. I worked for years to sell the world to the idea of non-existence, and if anyone intends to build a world, then it shall be me. Who put that sun in my sky?" And he waved his hand toward it, and the sun went out.
"We've got a perfect right,"
said my friend. "No, you have not," grinned George Smiley. "I faded all things into nothingness, even time, for myself. And because I made the whole world believe and all the universe, then the universe is mine, and I shall build."
"Why, you're trying to set yourself up as—"
"Yes," said George Smiley to my friend. "Yes, indeed."
"We have just as much right,"
howled my friend. "I shall then give you half of it," said George Smiley. "The lower, hotter half. I shall create a world for you alone to rule."
"No!"
protested my friend.
"Yes,"
said George Smiley. "It's a quaint idea. I got it out of an old book. Now begone, both of you." And suddenly we were falling again. But this time, no matter how much ground I thought about, no ground was there to stay me. My friend was soon separated from me, and he did not see the water which suddenly spread below me. I know he did not, for he was still falling when I last saw him. As for myself, I climbed out on a muddy bank of the Seine and wrung the water out of my clothes. The United States Marines didn't even ask me any questions when they locked me in their jail as a possible enemy airman. And I didn't volunteer any answers. I was too glad not to have to think about that bunk bed before I stretched out upon it. As far as I'm concerned, George Smiley can have all the universe for all I'll ever care. The end.